Welcome to the Victims Advocate podcast, where we explore current events, crime, security, and insights into advocacy for victims of violent crime. My name is Brandon Stein, and I am the Victims Advocate. Helping victims of violent crime is what I do, and you can find me at www.steinlaw.com or www.victimadvocate.com. Let's hit it. Alexander Irlin is here. I've known Alex for years. I appreciate you coming on, Alexander. Obviously, I know you're incredibly busy. You've been a lawyer for just about or close to 2 decades. So first, before we get into some other subjects, can you just give a brief background about your areas of practice and what you focus on in your legal practice?
Yeah, sure. As you correctly stated, my name is Alexander Irlin, and I've been an attorney since 2008, so roughly about 17 years. My practice basically varies from real estate to business law to some of commercial and civil litigation, as well as some I'll be co-counsel on some of the personal injury cases, among other things.
Yeah, so that's obviously a diverse area, a lot of business related. I'd imagine your life experiences helped you, in being a great advocate for your clients. I'm sure you have a very loyal client base that trusts you, trusts your advice, and certainly you know how to navigate around difficult issues, I'd imagine, right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
I guess I would have to agree with that. Yes.
Well, I would hope you wouldn't disagree. Otherwise we'll have to talk to some clients. But no, in all seriousness, I know your experience level. I can certainly vouch for you in that regard. But what I also know is you do have a background that's unique in that I'd say the majority of lawyers don't have the background you have. And believe it or not, law is actually your second career. Right, you were previously in law enforcement, right?
Well, I mean, I have experience in law enforcement as well as real estate. I had my real estate broker's license since I was 18 or 19 back in New York, and when I first arrived to Florida about roughly 20 years ago, 21 years ago, one of the first things that I also did, I actually did obtain real estate broker's license here in Florida. It was easier for me to do because of the reciprocity that exists, I think still exists, where I didn't have to go through the full schooling. I only had to take the test and basically was able to obtain the broker's license. So you are correct. I've been, I had several different jobs and careers in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think the term Renaissance man, where you could do everything, you've done everything, you have life experience you can't substitute, and having that experience of a realtor and understanding that aspect of professional, and then you go into you had law enforcement, and now you're in the law. But what's interesting is coming from law enforcement and ultimately making the transition to being an attorney. I'd imagine there's some skills that you would have had to have acquired working law enforcement up in New York, based on, serious experiences. I'd imagine maybe even just off the top of my head, I'm thinking negotiations at the very least, or how to speak to people. I'd imagine your time in law enforcement really set you up and prepared you for what you take on daily as a lawyer, right?
Well, I think it's... negotiations is one of the aspects. I think another aspect is how do you de-escalate a situation? Because as we know as lawyers, I've seen very unique things that many lawyers haven't seen, even in the day-to-day operations, where I remember seeing two attorneys almost basically having a fist fight in front of an older senior judge that was brought in for foreclosure calendar because we were running out of judges. And just seeing that and getting in the middle of it and telling them, hey, boys, separate, calm down, it's not worth it, going to fight here in the open courtroom. It does help. Also dealing with clients. Not all the clients are going to be very... Not all of them are going to be friendly or well-mannered, especially in the beginning when you don't have the privilege of carefully choosing and picking every single client. And that helps as well. And I think what's really but I'm not really sure if it's job-acquired skill, if it's more just a character or maybe something that's, came genetically, is people reading skills, because you always, when someone walks through the door, whether it's going to be an attorney, opposing counsel, a potential client, anybody, you try to get a read on them, and it's important because as an attorney, we all know one bad client can ruin your whole practice. Mishandling or underestimating opposing counsel can also cause a lot of grief. So it's always good to have that
Yeah.
perspective where you can kind of get a read
Yeah.
and get a feedback. And again, I'm not really sure if it's a skill that you can really acquire, but I think it's a skill that you can definitely develop in certain professions.
Yeah, and I think it was a match made. If it was something that was acquired by you, or just learned behavior, or just natural, probably comes natural to you. And when you say de-escalation, you know, that's an interesting term to use, because especially in the legal context, de-escalation, you're thinking of a fight or a high stress situation. So, you talk about issues that you've come across where you've had to de-escalate. Is there a particular a skill or resource that you go to try to maybe calm people down, or for lack of better words, de-escalate a situation?
Well, I think there is always, and that's what most people, especially civilians and lay people, don't necessarily aware of or use. There is basically, it should be 5 second rule, but a lot of times in an emergency situation, you don't have 5 seconds. In 5 seconds, you could be dead, or it could be people around you dead or injured, or it could be very great consequence. So sometimes it's only 2 or 3 second rule, but you basically do need to pause yourself and assess the situation, and you have to assess it very calmly, coolly, and collectively. You can't, and try to be, and also somewhat objectively, not just what you think it is, but what it really is. And I think if you can take that step back, or take that pause for, even if it's only a split second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds, that's basically where you decide what's going to be your next action. And like I said, I've been in situations where a judge, well, I shouldn't say it was a judge, in Miami-Dade County. Interestingly enough, the most of the violent and aggressive situations that I experienced in my career as a lawyer were in either family court, when I practiced divorce law and family law for about a year and a half, and also in foreclosures, which you would be surprised, because you would think foreclosures, it's a real estate thing, it's not really a big thing. But what people don't realize is that you dealing with the people and families that are losing their home. This is all they got. And a lot of the people felt hopeless. A lot of, especially during the foreclosure crisis of 2009, 2010, a lot of people felt that they had no options and they were going to be homeless. So the tensions ran very high, and I was experience. I had experiences maybe some lawyers didn't, because I used to be, when I started out, I worked for a big firm, and I was in special litigations, and I was in court sometimes pretty much 4 or 5 days a week, and had to run from court to court. I had 8, 10 hearings sometimes in one morning. So I really got exposed to a lot of this type of
So
scenarios.
you mentioned 5 second rule, right?
That would be an ideal, optimal amount of
Right,
time.
right. So
So
so let, let's
but a lot
say
of times you just won't have that 5 seconds.
right, you have maybe 1 or 2 seconds where
Three
adrenaline's
seconds would be
going.
the best probably you can hope for in an emergency or extreme situation.
Right. So let me put it this way. So in an emergency situation, you have, let's say, 3 seconds where, okay, my emotions are running high, the adrenaline is pumping through my body. I make one bad move here, and of what seems to be a relatively docile situation can now escalate into possibly a catastrophic situation. So what goes through your mind? How do you keep yourself calm? Because obviously, when you have shootings, when you have potentially violent crime that can occur, when you're talking 3 seconds, do you take a deep breath? What can you do to assess the situation properly and not take a wrong step, because a wrong step can mean dire consequences?
Sure. Well, let me give you an example of one of the decisions that I had to make that some people probably would have done it the other way. As I was mentioning the foreclosures and all the high tensions and emotions, I was before one of the judges who was just new judge on the bench, and this family, I believe they were Haitian family, got extremely upset because basically their house was getting taken away. And we're talking about there were at least 7 or 8 people from that family in that courtroom. So they decided to go and attack the attorney for the bank that was basically just doing his job, and the guy was there with 100 other files trying to, basically close the files and they attacked him. And we're talking about 7 or 8 people jumping one guy. There were a couple of people who tried to separate him. The judge jumped and kind of went to this chamber, pressed the button. So my thinking was, okay, I got 3 or 4 seconds. This guy is getting beat up. What do I do now? Do I jump in and try to help him? Am I really going to be very successful when there's 7 or 8 people on top of him? I mean, you really have to assess also your physical abilities and your
Yeah.
potential of getting injured as well while trying to do things. So what I realized is within literally those 3, 4, 5, 10 seconds as this was taking place, is that my better judgment was actually, I heard that there was security and the sheriffs running up. This was on the 22nd of all places, 21st floor, and the closest sheriff station was actually downstairs at the courthouse or at the reception. So I guess once the button came up, the sheriffs actually did go up, and I heard commotion, and then I realized they're going in different directions. They're not going to the right courtroom. They're actually running in opposite direction. So I thought the best thing I can help here is to get out of there and basically tell them what's going on, tell them what exactly is happening and where I need to go, rather than try to handle this myself. Because again, there was 4 or 5 of them coming in to help. There was one, and they were armed and equipped. There was one of me, and as you know, we don't carry any weapons or anything in the courtroom, which wouldn't be a good idea to use any weapons. I mean, at least
Yeah.
any weapons in the packed courtroom, anyways. So those are decisions. Those, as you mentioned, those split-second decisions that can mean life and death. That could mean major injury and just somebody walking away, unscattered. And again, a lot of times it's a judgment call. It is a judgment
So
call.
so let me ask you, when you say judgment call, sometimes the better judgment call is not the more aggressive, superhero approach. It may be like you're saying, hey, listen, I'm assessing the situation. There's 4 or 5 guys. There's me jumping in there is not going to de-escalate the situation. It may in fact escalate the situation. So let me go get sheriff's office. Let me get deputies in here, because that's the best way to eliminate the conflict and hopefully eliminate any threat of more severe type of crime.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned it. You actually hit the nail right on the head. When when I was going through my police training, one of the I'll never forget this. This was back in New York, and one of the things the trainer told us, she said, the only heroes I want to see is when you order your lunch on your sandwiches. We used to call it hero. I don't want to see any heroes, superheroes. It's that usually ends up very bad. Not only bad for you, it ends up bad for the members of the public and others involved. Because what you see when you go and watch movies like Die Hard or there's quite a few movies that
Yeah.
you can watch with all the superheroes, whether cops or military or just renegades. In real life, it just doesn't work. We have gravity. Also the bullets find their way, and when you see in the movie when there's about 100 shots and nobody gets hit, it just doesn't happen in real life. I mean, it happens, but very rarely. I wouldn't chance it. So what I'm trying to say is that you're right on point. Usually it's the only time I would say that you might have to take a superhero route or take a very aggressive and direct route to help someone, if you really think that doing so would probably save them from death or grave injury. And even at that point, you still have to keep in the back of your mind, you might be risking your own life. I mean, that's something you have to be willing to do, because everybody have, or at least most people have families and kids who depend on you, and you have to always think about them as well. Yes, you're going to help someone, you're going to be a good Samaritan. I mean, is that really something that's appropriate? Is that something that you're going to be capable of? I think it comes down to, you really have to evaluate the situation. You really have to evaluate your chances of success. And you really have to be reasonable and realistic about your physical and other abilities, because as we age, as we're not 20 anymore. In our minds, we still think we're 18 years old or 19 and possess those physical abilities. But, we just might not even have the abilities we had 20, 30 years ago when we were much younger.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned your training up in New York. You still use those skills today. Where whether you know it or not, it's something that's inherent inside of you. It's, to a sense, learned behavior, but it's also innate, where it comes natural to you. So when you go to places, or when you come into these very, very high stressful situations, you got that that steady hand where most other people may try to be the superheroes or may try to jump in and take rash, irresponsible decisions that lead to shootings, deaths, serious injury, that possibly could have been de-escalated, you know?
Well, I think if you do something for a while, there's a concept that's been pretty old now, that if you do something for 3 weeks, it becomes a habit, right? So basically, at least that's a general approach. So
Yeah.
basically, if you do something for a while, it becomes your second nature at some point. You don't think about it twice. And I'll give you kind of a funny, but at the same time very appropriate and related example. Last night, I had dinner with a friend of mine who is a former New Orleans police sergeant
Uh,
who did 25 years in New Orleans, one of the most dangerous places. Went from being a street cop to being a detective, to being he was in narcotics, he was in homicide, and ended up in internal affairs. So by far a guy who has much more experience than I. I mean, I wouldn't even try to compare it to him. And he also, interestingly enough, which is really might be disturbing to some, but in a line of duty, he actually ended up killing 3 criminals or 3 perpetrators, all justified. Which not a lot of cops fire their weapon in their career, and this guy basically, he had a rough in New Orleans. But the reason I'm bringing this up, so we go into this German restaurant, which is in a private house, smaller restaurant in Sarasota, and we walk in, and they give us our table, and the table basically one side is against the wall, and the other one is against the. Basically, you would be sitting with your back to the door. One thing, and again, they do learn it. You do learn in the teacher in training is if you rest, you put your back against the wall. You don't want somebody coming behind you and stabbing you or attacking you. So you always try to have
literally stabbing you in the back.
right, right. That's
Right?
why they say even
Yeah.
even as early as like on street patrol, and I remember patrolling streets in Canarsie. You basically just you and your partner, and you basically do foot patrols, and it's a dangerous area. Even back when I was there, it was a dangerous area, and we were told if you ever take a break or whatever, and you stop, like put your back against a building or against something that so somebody can just sneak behind you and attack you. So we're in this restaurant now. And the first thing he does, and as a seniority goes, I let him. He dashes for the seat that's next to the wall. So I'm not gonna sit next to him. That would look
Right.
that would
Yeah.
look. So what I had to do is, and you learn to compromise into those type. And I'm not gonna sit at another table. And I guess theoretically we could have tried to ask for a different table, but I mean the restaurant was pretty packed, and I was gonna make a scene. Just we had a reservation. It was a busy restaurant. So what I did is I did sit with my back to the door, but I kind of twisted my chair so at least I still have a partial visual. So those are things I don't even think about. I mean, those are like I wouldn't be comfortable sitting with my back for an hour or two. With my back, to the basically where to the door, to the entrance point where I don't see who's coming in, who's coming out. It's just, to me that's dangerous.
So in a sense, it's a blessing and a curse because
Correct.
let
Correct.
me explain why. So here's my thought on it: the people who don't think like you, which are most people who are not former law enforcement, people who don't think like your friend, who are not former law enforcement, they walk into a restaurant, they just want to make sure they have a table that's not under the air conditioning vent, But why I say it's a curse is you walk in, and not only that, you're walking in and you're making sure the table is situated and your seat's going to be situated so you could potentially, I'm assuming you want to watch the door and check, scoping everyone out that comes in to make sure there's no threats, right?
Right, more or less. I mean, one of the things that I always tell people, I've seen too many victims in my lifetime, and I've seen some victims who were really badly injured or killed. And one thing I never want to be is a victim. And one of the ways assuring, or at least maximizing your chances of not being victimized, is being aware and watching your back, watching your
Vigilant.
being vigilant, being aware,
Yeah.
situation awareness. So let's say if I walk, I'll give you an example. When I go to Main Street here for they have a monthly events, and sometimes I might go into the small brewery just to grab beer to go, whatever. I walk in and I do scan the place. I mean, it's just I don't even think about it twice. I do scan the place to make sure. All I have to do really is just go up to the bar, order the drink to go, that beer to go, and get out. I mean, most people it's such a routine little thing. But I would go in and I would still scan and make sure there's everything looks good and there is nothing going on there. Which again, you're right. In a way, it's a curse and a blessing, but in a way, it doesn't bother me because I don't have to think about it twice. It's not like I basically have to prepare myself mentally and physically. Oh, I'm just going to go in and reconnaissance the whole place. I mean,
Yeah.
it's basically like if you were a violin player, right, and somebody handed you a violin. Right away, you would know how to basically handle it, how to hold it, how to, it's natural. It's not something that you think about twice.
So there's not, because for the layperson, it may seem, wow, this guy's tortured. Every time he walks in to get a Starbucks coffee, he's got to scope out and case out the place like he's on duty, So for you, it just comes natural, no different than a musician, picking up an instrument. That, hey, it may be stressful for some people, but for me, I've been doing it my whole life practically. I made a career out of it, and now I'm a lawyer. But still, that you can't take the law enforcement side out of me.
Well, think about it this way: as a trial lawyer, as you are a trial lawyer,
Yeah.
you go in for an argument before the judge and sometimes the jury. For any average normal person, this would be probably the most terrifying experience, horrifying experience in the world. Public speaking alone, let alone in the courtroom or an open courtroom. Now, you don't think about it twice. I mean, yeah, you prepare. I mean, you get ready, but it comes naturally because that's what you do for a living and that's what you're trained to do. Even for a lot of lawyers, that would be a scary proposition. I mean, I've seen lawyers who never seen a courtroom, and when they end up in a courtroom somehow, I mean, they're terrified. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to say, and it's kind of the same thing. I mean, it's the same thing I find myself when I deal with real estate matters because of how much experience and dealings I've had in real estate as a realtor, as a broker. It's almost like certain things that might be difficult and complex for some, even real estate attorneys. To me, it seems like it's almost like it's basic stuff. Just it breaks down and you see it. I guess. I think another good example would be if you get a good surgeon who's experienced. He's not going to have trouble finding, body parts and and organs and stuff like that. And then you get somebody who is a layperson or a new doctor. They might be much more terrified. I mean, it comes with the territory and experience.
Yeah, yeah, it's
in most cases.
yeah, it's in some professions, if you're a professional athlete or something, getting older is not good. Having more experience is not necessarily good because you're losing your physical ability. But what you're talking about is just wisdom, life wisdom, professional wisdom that you've acquired. And it's something that, you can't learn it like the snap of the finger. It's years upon years,
Well, one thing I want to mention, Brendan, you're right, kind of for the most part, but I also think, at least in my case, as we're getting older, I think some of us don't have as much patience also dealing with certain things. We just, we've seen it all. We've been through a lot of things, and it's like sometimes when you see stuff that are really, unreasonable or just plain stupid, can really trigger you more so than when we were younger and more patient. And we just, I'll give you a very, very, very simple example. And I think we got examples are the best thing. It's a real life experiences. A couple of days ago, I drive my car out of the garage, my SUV, and I go around the corner, and what do I see? There's a 3-year-old playing football right on the roadway, and his 5-year-old sibling next to him on the roadway, and their father is on the sidewalk directing them. And I stop the car, and I say to this gentleman, who's my neighbor, I guess, I never met him before, I said, "Sir, it's really dangerous for the kids because people do speed in this HOA and other HOAs. And, it's not really a good idea for them to play in the roadway." To that, basically, I get a response, somewhat unfriendly response. "Well, that's their problem. If they want to speed, that's their problem. It's not my problem." So I said, "Sir, those are your kids." So all of a sudden, well, that's a problem. People are speeding and the kids needs to play outside, And here's where it comes a 3-second assessment, right? Well, at that point, I might have even had 5 because, I mean, this guy wasn't actually being physically aggressive or anything, just rude and arrogant. So then you assess, you look at the guy, you look at the situation, you ask yourself the question, what do I do now? Do I get into an argument with this guy and try, maybe park my car, get out and try to talk to him? Or is that situation that's simply going to escalate based on the body language, the tone of voice, and everything else? And I made a decision that I'm not going to change this guy. I'm not going to convince him otherwise. I could already see the attitude. And getting out of the car, and this was a guy in his 30s who was all tattooed, and I found out later him and his wife, they're like bodybuilders or whatever. I did my background. I found out.
Probably best to de-escalate the
So
situation.
what I just said to them, sir, please be careful.
Yeah.
Have a nice day. And came to realize then when I spoke to my wife and a few other neighbors, it turned out he's been doing the same thing over and over again. He's been told that, look, someone is going to run over your kid because the kid should not be in the middle of the road. Even if the cars are going 25 miles an hour, they're supposed to go. It's still very dangerous because when they make a curve, and as an accident attorney, I don't have to tell you, I don't have to tell you
Yeah.
much about this. You've seen the horrors and the tragedies that come out of it. And, for someone, being a father myself, and I know you have 3 kids,
Hmm.
it's almost heartbreaking to see, like, I don't really care about this guy and his attitude, but to see a 3 or 5 or 6 year old kid getting ran over and killed or badly injured, literally around the corner from my house, it just, and that's where, it's sometimes it's very tough to really stay cool, calm, and collective with this type of scenarios. I mean, the other example I
But
would tell you, yeah, the other things
let,
that it's hard to tolerate, at least for me on a personal level, always has been if I see a guy beating up a woman or beating up a child. I mean, those are things where, unfortunately, I might not have my better judgment, and I might still jump in and do whatever is necessary or whatever I can to, to try to
no,
save them.
your emotions. You can't take your emotions out and your feelings on things. But
And your
what I will
principles. I mean, there's certain
and
principles that we all
principles.
have that, no matter what happens, it's almost like, look, I don't care what the consequences are, but I'm going to do the right thing and I'm going to do what the best I can to help that person. And like I said, the older we get, I guess there's probably, at least for me, there's very few exceptions where, I'm going to try to do whatever I can no matter what, because
Yeah.
again, because we've seen what happens when we do make decisions that are somewhat weren't thought of, how should I guess the best way to formulate it, when you make a decision on the spur of a moment, there are going to be consequences. And, the older you get, the more you see what happens when you make those decisions and how they can turn out. So, that's
Yeah.
kind of
I
trips you
mean,
up.
listen. Even the most innocuous thing that you don't think is significant, it could lead to a serious event with tragic consequences where even crimes occur. So I think de-escalation is a really good term, and you use it every day, even in your personal life when you're just leaving your driveway. But
Right. Of
look,
course. Right.
yeah,
Right. Of course, it's. I think it's important to mention there are going to be situations in life. Hopefully, it won't affect you and me, but we
yeah,
both know that can happen, where you might not have a chance. There might not be a second chance, where you do have to stand your ground and do whatever you have to do to protect yourself and protect your family or protect another person. But again, you always have to remember that any action that you take will have a reaction, and there are going to be consequences. And the older we get, the more we realize, like I guess as you said, the wisdom comes in, and you all of a sudden you're not only thinking what's going to happen at that point, but you think what's going to happen down the road. And what is it going to cost you? And is it going to cost you a lot of money? Is it going to cost you a lot of your time, or is it going to cost you your life? So you always, and again, on the spur of a moment, it's different. It's very difficult, at that moment to make, it's not always easy to make the right decision, but that's why you do need to take a step back for, at least if it's for a split second,
well,
and just try to think what's the best thing to do.
listen, life is a game of chess. You got to think a few moves ahead and see what the consequences are. But it's interesting stuff, man. And look, I know you're busy. I do appreciate you taking the time. I know you're
Sure.
busy. You got many clients. You got your practice. But what I would like, if there are any clients or anyone who needs to find you or for your services, is there a good way to reach out to you if they need your services in any capacity?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you my email, which is American Law. That's American, like American Airlines Law, at ymail, like gmail.ymail.com. And my office number is 305-803-2292. And one of the things I want to mention to you, because of the kind of a unique and boutique nature of my practice,
Yeah.
unlike a lot of lawyers, I don't spend quite a, no, I don't spend a lot of money. I hardly spend any money advertising or marketing. Basically, every single day nowadays, I get emails, calls from people, referrals, former clients, friends of former clients. Everything is kind of word of mouth, and it keeps me very busy. You and me, we have a little bit of a different structures in our law
Sure.
firms. You're a
Sure.
little bit more expanded and have more,
Yeah.
people working for you. I have few people working for me remotely. I don't have. Yeah, I know you have a quite a few offices, and they're fully staffed. I basically do a lot of, like I said, a lot of the people that work for me, they work remotely. I work from my home every once in a while, and I do have offices in Aventura and Sarasota, that I regularly attend to. So yeah, so basically, if anybody, and another thing also I want to mention is I do speak fluent. That's something you didn't mention. I do speak fluent Russian, and I did leave Russia, when it was Soviet Union back in 1988, quite a while ago when I was a kid. So if any of your clients, as we know, or anybody else needs an attorney who speaks Russian, I think it's very important to have a lawyer who speaks your language, because a lot of stuff, as we all know, gets lost in translation, especially when it
For
comes to
sure.
complex stuff like, legalese and legal language and stuff like that. You can't always count on Google Translate to help out with that.
Well, that's for sure. That's the truth. But so Alexander, I appreciate it. I appreciate the time, really, brother. I appreciate. I've known you for years, and I can definitely vouch for the work that you do and the way you speak with clients, 1,000%. So, look, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. I thought we discussed some interesting things that most people don't think about, which is the goal. So, Alexander Irlin, thank you again, my friend.
All right. Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Brandon Stein, and I am the Victim's Advocate. Your voice matters, and if you or someone you know needs representation, visit steinlaw.com or victimadvocate.com for more information. See you next time.